just made a pit stop to collect Barry. It's my cousin, and he's been to this cool derelict house in Foxhill. So let's find Barry and see if he's awake. G'day Barry, how you going? Would you like to come and take some photos with us? Yeah, Barry, you got your stuff? Yeah. Well, let's do this thing.
Okay, let's go.
It's Raymond here. We've now arrived at the derelict house at Foxhill. It's looking really good, and the main thing is we've asked permission to be here from Peter Lyons, the owner. So we have permission here, which is a really important thing if you're going on private property. So all systems go, the sun's shining on me, some good clouds behind us, which promises to provide a bit of a grungy background. So let's go. Okay, right, we're headed off to the farmhouse now. It's a pretty cool place here, really easy. We could even drive up here, which was handy for all our gear. Right, now here we are at the house. It's quite small, it's probably over 100 years old. Before we photograph it, I just must point out that for landscape photography, you don't want a bright sunny day with the sun overhead in summer. It provides really harsh sunlight. But in this case, when you're shooting architecture, particularly the genre of dereliction, it's really good to have harsh sunlight because you get a lot of contrast on those old rustic weatherboards and broken windows and rusty iron. It's really good to have strong contrast and saturated colours when you're doing man-made objects such as derelict houses. And this is one time when you can break the rules. We don't have to wait for the golden hour. You'll note behind us we've got some clouds in the sky to add a bit of drama and mood. Hopefully they get nice and dark and grungy, but we can't control that. And remember, the best rule of composition is to use your feet. So let's move around and find a really good composition. Now, Barry and I have fluffed around outside this old house, and we've got what I think is the best view. I've got two sides of the house, and just getting the side of the house and the front, which is the main thing, makes the building look more three-dimensional rather than just looking straight on. Right, so just a rundown on my camera settings. I've got a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a full-frame camera. I've set the aperture to f11. The shutter speed at the moment in this light is 1/30th of a second, which is slow, but I'm not shooting handheld. I've got a good sturdy tripod. And ISO 100, which is standard for landscape photography. Now HDR stands for high dynamic range. And when you get a shot with so much contrast because of the strong sunlight, you get really dark shadows, and the shadows just go black. But with HDR, you can tame that high dynamic range and actually squash it a bit by layering 3 different or 5 different photos together. So that's what we're going to do. Right, I'm going to bracket 5 exposures using exposure compensation. This is our first image. It's underexposed 2 stops. See on the histogram, all the pixels are ganged up on the far left hand side. This next image is underexposed only 1 stop. It's still a bit dark. You can see the shadows are still filled in. This shot is exposed perfectly, but the shadows and highlights are still clipped because the camera can't capture all the tones in this scene. Our fourth image is overexposed 1 stop. The highlights on the roof have lost any detail. And finally, our last image is overexposed 2 stops. We've really blown out the highlights. Okay, here's my final HDR composite. On the computer I have combined all 5 images together using the Photomatix program. That's what I know about HDR photography, but let's ask Barry. Barry, what do you think about HDR photography? How do you use it in your photos and how does it benefit your photos?
I love HDR. HDR is particularly good for bringing out the texture in your subject, especially in old buildings. Ray and I have been photographing this old building here for a long time, and I've taken shots of this which have done very well in exhibitions and salons, both in New Zealand and also overseas. HDR to me is not a gimmick, it's a way of bringing out what's already in your picture. I don't use HDR in the camera, I use a program called Photomatix. And what I do is I take 5 shots bracketed by 1 stop each way. So the first shot is taken as the meter reads. The second shot will be 1 stop under, 2 stops under, and then 1 stop over and 2 stop over. Of course, your camera has to be on a tripod, and it's best if you use a cable release. I then use a program called Photomatix to bring the images together in a process called tone mapping, which brings your images together, and then you can make all sorts of adjustments in Photomatix to your heart's content. HDR is a good way of bringing out the best in your photographs.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that wee movie on HDR photography. If you really enjoyed it, why not subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to download your free ebook on landscape photography. Well, it's time to get out of here.